For most of Australia's farming history, meat processing was a local affair. But since the 1980s, our meat industry has become increasingly consolidated. Today, just a handful of multinational corporations dominate the processing and export of red meat in this country. Whether you're a small producer or a conscious consumer, that concentration of power has serious consequences. Some farmers are pushing back. Tammi Jonas is one of the pioneers of the on-farm meat processing movement in Australia. She's fighting for food sovereignty, transparency and community-based alternatives to the industrial meat machine. Tammy, how you going?
Good day, Tim. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having us out here. It's a fantastic opportunity to talk to someone who's taking a really positive approach to a bit of a crisis in our food supply system, isn't it?
Yeah, well, somebody's got to do it, which means all of us have got to do it.
The 1980s really brought a consolidation of the meat processing industry, didn't they, in this country? Can you explain to me a little bit about what's happened with both compliance and also international finance to market access for growers?
Yeah, I mean, up until the 80s, did you know that most abattoirs were actually government owned?
Yeah, right.
And I only learned that recently, and it was really common for the government to own the abattoirs, and then often they were run in a kind of hot desking situation. So the butchers brought in their teams and the animals, and they did their day of slaughter and they cleaned it up, and then they got out of there, and the next day a new team came in. And that functioned pretty well until the major focus on free trade and export and buying up all of the system into fewer and fewer corporate hands.
And so what's happened now? What sort of landscape do producers have when they take their stock to market?
Well, I mean, there's almost no landscape left, like we lost in 4 months between December and March of this last year, we lost access to 6 abattoirs in WA, New South Wales and Victoria. And that is just continuing. So, and Tees, which is one of the biggest, just sold out the rest of their share to Cargill. So now it's just JBS and Cargill are the 2 biggest owners of abattoirs in this country, 2 multinationals. Yeah, that's right. And the vertical integration in the system, which is not only multinationals, that's also an Australian abattoir-owned kind of situation, means they don't want to provide a service kill for farmers who would like to control their own supply chain, who want to actually sell their meat directly to people.
And by vertical integration, you mean transport, you mean the abattoir itself, you mean starting to own farms, you mean grain, you mean everything?
I mean everything, right back to feedlots and things. And then now it's even worse. They even own the training for meat inspectors. So we've got farmers trying to get their meat inspector ticket for micro abattoirs, and they can't get in because you have to be an employee of one of the abattoirs to do your training.
So they not only block you from their market, but they also block you from their training.
And which means they block you from establishing your own system.
Now, farmers can still take their animals to market. They can still get an agent and go to a livestock market and sell their animals. But what impact is this having on the price that farmers can get, particularly smaller farmers, for their animals at market?
Well, obviously decreasing competition is always bad for people selling things, right?
Yeah.
When you don't have a competitive market, then you don't have competitive prices. And so they're like what's happened in the dairy industry for much longer. They're just price takers now. They don't get to set, well, they've been for a long time, but it's getting worse because there's not enough others out there saying, well, I won't pay more for that animal than you. Now there's where there were 11 buyers, now there might be 2 at some sale yard, at some markets. So it's grim.
So people on past videos that I've done on this topic have said, well, why don't farmers just set up their own butcher shop on farm? It's a little bit more complex than just setting something up, isn't it? You're going through the process at the moment. Talk me through what it's been like for you.
Yeah, so we've had a butcher shop on the farm for 11 years, and that was relatively straightforward in comparison.
Yep.
Because it's rural industry here in Victoria in the farming zone, we didn't have to have a permit for that. It's a converted shipping container, and back then we thought, we should probably be looking into this abattoir problem. You look at it, the regulations around it, whether it's food safety at the time, early on seemed kind of hard, but now that I've been running a boning room for 11 years, it doesn't. But the planning regulations are the real issue, because if you want to put in an abattoir in Victoria or New South Wales, it's treated the same as if I was doing a JBS scale abattoir to do my 70 square metre abattoir.
So you've got a 70 square metre abattoir. How many animals can you process in a day through your 70 square metre abattoir?
Our permit allows us to do up to 6 cattle, 30 pigs or 48 sheep in 1 day a week.
So that's 6 cattle or or.
That's
it's
right.
Not all at once.
Yeah, so it's tiny.
It's micro.
And it's all we applied for, because we're not trying to be primarily an abattoir. We were a farm in need of an abattoir. And so are the other 15 farms involved in the project.
Now, how far were you travelling to find an abattoir that would take your animals at the moment?
So we were going 45 minutes to Kyneton and just over an hour to Laverton in Melbourne.
And then what happened
for
there?
pigs. And we still go to the pig abattoir there, which is owned by JBS, for who knows how much longer. Kyneton shut us all out in December. They just said, they're owned by Kilcoy, which is a big multinational, and they just said, we're not taking less than 15 cattle or 50 sheep in one go.
Because for a large abattoir with the clean down times in between batches and that sort of thing, it's just not economically worth it for them.
It's not the clean down times. It's actually just they don't want to deal with us as clients, as suppliers. If they can deal with 4 rather than 40, they'd rather.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so that's that consolidation once again. It's
Totally.
knocking you out from a market. So you could no longer access the abattoirs.
Yeah.
So you thought, well, why not do it ourselves?
Yeah, even before we couldn't access them, we started researching. Like, we went over to the US and looked at 8 small-scale abattoirs back in 2017.
Yep.
I wrote a report about that called the Dead Local Meat Report.
Yep.
And then, you know, we just kept coming back to the drawing board of like, should we do this on another site? Like, should we lease land? Or
Yes.
should we do it on our own farm? How do other people feel they have the security if we do it on our own farm? So there's a lot of things you got to consider when you're doing this. And originally thinking somewhere else would be better, we realized was not better because of the leasing. If you have to carry any debt on the facility, whether it's through leasing or renting arrangements or a mortgage for that matter, that's a bigger burden on it than if you have a freehold site on your own farm and you don't need to charge it a lease. So that was a big part of the consideration of doing it here. And because for us, we get the full benefit of being able to walk our animals and not put them on a trailer. Like, and the others are mostly coming from very close, so they won't have a long transport either. But I just feel so grateful that we'll be able to walk our animals in and they'll never have seen a wheeled vehicle.
And you've not only got low stress with the handling of the animals coming up to the abattoir, but you've also got low stress handling in the abattoir.
Yes.
Let's go and have a look at these yards.
Yeah.
Because they're kind of pretty special.
They're very special. We took Temple Grandin's designs and tried to fit them to our tiny little facility. And then when I had what based very much on her designs, what I thought she would approve of, I thought I'll ask Temple Grandin what she thinks of this. So I sent her the drawings where there's
She actually got back to you.
within a day. She got back to me, and the only improvement she made was that our race here needed to be 2 meters long, not 185, I think I had it originally, so that the cattle don't balk as they come down the race. They just want to be able to see that bit further before the corner, and so that's what we did. We stretched that out a little bit. They'll come around that corner to the knockbox. That'll all be solid walls, so that they're not distracted or scared by anything happening around them. And there'll be a roof over this, of course, to protect them from sun or rain. And then I'll show you the most special part. Come on in and be a cow, Tim. So you're in where the holding yards will be. There'll be a little laneway they walk down here, which curves here into the forcing pen. So this is like a very Temple design of where you've just got that gate that just quietly pushes them around until they come into the race. So they're coming down the race. This has all got solid walls, remember, so there are no distractions to the side. And as they come around, cattle want to constantly turn back to where they've come from. Of course, Temple's taught us that. Observation can teach you that too. And so they come, that feels very natural to them until they get here to the knockbox. When they come into the knockbox, they can still see the paddocks out there. So they feel like they're going to be able to keep going because there's a glass door.
So this glass door is a bit of an innovation, isn't it? I mean, they've got a beautiful view of the paddock. It's the last thing they ever see.
Exactly. It's second best to being able to kill them in the paddock, but it's pretty good, right? If you're an animal coming through here, you think you're heading back to green grass.
So, Tammy, how many months away from being finished do you think this little micro abattoir is?
I'm crossing fingers for 2, 3 on the outside if there's some holdups. I mean, Stuart's building it almost single-handedly,
Yes.
while also farming.
Yes.
So how long's a piece of string? But we're very close. You know, the hard work's been done.
And how many years has it taken to get to this point?
Well, from when we first did that tour in 2017, you know, we're looking at 8 years. And the actual, from what we put in the development application in November 2022. So it's coming up on, so it's 2.5 years of
2.5 years
process.
to get approved.
It was a year and a half, 550 days to get approved.
Right.
And then we started building the second we got the approval. Like we were just away. We actually shifted at that point to a vehicle-based solution because you don't need a planning permit, and we had waited so long for the permit.
Yep.
And then you can see, you know, there's this, you need the height for cattle. So we've had to build this tower.
And you've also purpose-built this to handle larger beasts because a lot of homegrown animals won't fit that 600 kilo preferred kill weight that the major industrial abattoirs want.
Yeah, and even under 500, some of them.
And sometimes those beasts are better quality at the end of the day anyway.
For sure. I mean, an older animal is, in our view, always a higher quality animal. We would never kill yearlings here. We don't think they're delicious. Yep. We want an animal to be a minimum of 2. And most of the people in our movement are sort of growing them on to 3, 4. I think my favorite is around 7 years old. If you've got the carrying capacity for that, great. Or if you buy older animals that people are just getting rid of and grow them on for another year on your property, and that just eats so well. I've got an 11-year-old cow hanging in my chiller right now that a farmer needed, who's part of the collective, needed to get off his property because of the drought, and donated for us to keep raising money for the Abattoir project. Let's
talk about waste.
Yep.
The paunch, the blood, that sort of thing. How do you deal with that as a small abattoir?
So first of all, we want to keep as many things for edible as possible, or use, like the hides. So rather than disposing of things, we'd like to use them for what else they can be used.
Sure.
Where we can't, something that could be waste in another system where you need to pay a rendering plant to take it away, Stuart has built us a rotating composting drum. Her name is Audrey.
Nice.
And she
runs off solar power.
And she runs off solar
does
power.
Your abattoir.
As does our abattoir. That's right. There's no fossil fuels in the energy requirements for this.
Even
facility.
The backup generator runs off vegetable
off
fuel. Off
waste veggie oil. That's right.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. So he's pretty ingenious at these things. So when I do the evisceration here, and I'm also the meat inspector in the property, so I do the inspection. The offal drops into a Euro bin and goes out a chute there, and then it goes directly to Audrey to be lifted up into her. At the moment, we're doing 25-to-1 carbon to nitrogen, but we're always open to whether that should be a higher carbon load. And the wastewater also, because you've got to keep a compost wet, so all of the washdown water will go into a tank that feeds into Audrey to keep the compost wet and has the added benefit of treating the washdown water, which also dictates you can't use any harsh chemicals in the facility, which suits us really well. We've never used them in the boning room. We only use vinegar and baking soda for our sanitize step. We use degrease, like a biodegradable dish detergent for degreasing, but sanitize is just acid or alkaline, right? So vinegar and baking soda won't kill your compost.
Now, the compost then gets used further on the farm. It gets used as part of a horticultural production system that you've got running just down from the abattoir.
Just right next to the abattoir, that's right.
So instead of being decoupled, horticulture and agriculture are coming together on your property.
Yeah, there's a thing they started writing about in the 1800s actually about how industrial agriculture, as it was turning, was creating something they called the metabolic rift.
Yep.
And I mean, you don't even have to know much about the theory to immediately go, yeah, there's a rift in the metabolism of our farming lives, isn't there? When we have to send waste away to be dealt with, instead of going, oh, we've created surplus fertility here. How can we use that where it's needed? Market garden needs fertility. We create fertility. Why not bring them back together? So we share our land with market gardeners.
So that's the practice, and the practice is working for you.
Yeah.
Now, you're in Daylesford in Victoria.
Yeah.
It's quite an affluent area. Do you think that this would work in more remote areas or in areas that are away from the tourist trade?
Oh, absolutely. We don't feed tourists much, to be honest. Because we're CSA, we feed 75 households here around the region and in Melbourne. And so do the other meat collective members. They almost all serve just CSA members or farmers markets. Mm-hmm. If you're in much more remote areas and you have less people who want to buy this food, then I think there's going to be a different solution. And that might be where your mobile abattoirs have a role to play to move them around between areas. Here, it's not so much the affluent tourist market, though. It's just actually the proximity of humans. This is a pretty densely populated rural landscape compared with a lot of other parts of Australia.
And being a densely populated rural landscape, you've got the lifestylers. Have they caused any issues with the permit process and with the construction of the abattoir?
Absolutely. They're the reason it took 550 days to get approval.
Not the farmers?
No, definitely not the farmers.
Lifestylers.
Well, there's one vegetarian cattle farmer who doesn't live here. I don't really understand that part of it, but he was one of them. But no, it's mostly the rich people from the city who bought a property for way too much money, drove up all of our property prices in the making, and then they led the case against us at VCAT. which is what took over a year and a bit was just the VCAT case. But the good thing about taking the leader of the Food Sovereignty Alliance to VCAT is we set a really positive precedent for others. The member was so resoundingly in our favour that she removed conditions that council had originally intended to put on the permit. She said, that's not reasonable. This is a farm. They're doing normal farming things, and they should not be stopped from doing normal farming things. So if someone else tries to do this in Victoria, at least, that precedent is already set. That she considered this intrinsic to agriculture, an abattoir, which is what we said. So now the next person who wants to do it can say, I believe it's already set in precedent that this is intrinsic to agriculture and should be approved.
Well, that is one exciting project, Tammy. That abattoir is just going to be amazing. I'd love to come back and see it in operation when it's up and going.
Yeah, I can't wait to be able to show you.
But you've got some amazing stuff to tell us about your 70-acre farm as well.
All right, so here on our 69 acres, we're very aligned with the global agroecology movement of smallholders. And what that means is we want our animals moving, we want to be planting trees, we want to be looking after land and people. So the cattle are up here on the volcano. Getting water at the top of there was a real challenge, obviously. And so that tank up there is filled with water that he uses 100-year-old piston pumps. He gets treadmill motors and solar panels from the tip, and he MacGyvers it together, and that can pump 100-metre head, so that then the water lines run through those shelter belts where he's been planting trees on contour for nearly 15 years. And then the pigs run in a rotational system at the back as well, all on pasture and regularly moved. And we managed to support 7 livelihoods and 10 people on less than 70 acres.
That's a really important point too, isn't it, Tammy? The fact that your 70-acre farm employs 7 people with a living wage. If we bring agriculture production streams back on farm, there's actually a benefit to the community at large because we're creating employment in our place of living.
Totally.
So we're cutting down on transport costs, we're cutting down on emissions, we're increasing affluence in our regional centres, and we're doing that by providing safe, clean, good quality food that's been grown ethically.
Totally. Everybody wins, right?
It seems too good to be true.
Well, you're here. Does it look true?
And what better place to talk business than the Belvedere where you run your education programs?
For sure. Come on in.
Tammy, I feel like I'm going into the Church of Sustainable Farming.
That's cute.
I've got a couple of questions for you.
Sure.
You're what people might term perhaps a little bit of an overachiever. I mean, you started farming 15 years ago. You've already got a vertically integrated farm where you do all your own production on farm and sell from your farm. You've got your meat inspector's ticket. You've done a PhD. What was the PhD in? On the rise of agroecology and
smallholders in Australia dealing with the problem of the state to do more of this.
So you've done a PhD in your life.
Yes.
You've set up what is potentially one of the first micro-abattoirs on farm for a long time in Victoria, a state that I would have considered very difficult to do that in. You're also the lead of the Australian Food Sovereignty Alliance. Is this within the scope of the ordinary person? Could I do this if I wanted to?
Look, for sure it is. I think the kind of, as people say, the pioneering aspect, the like working out how to get through all of those hurdles and barriers requires a special kind of persistence. And so
you clearly have.
Yeah, so Stuart and I do, and that's great. So we're doing that. And then because we're collectivized with the Food Sovereignty Alliance, now we're making all those resources available so that communities who maybe don't have the particular background and the particular persistence and enthusiasm that I think we bring to these things, they can find the resources and go, okay, here's the out-of-the-box version. Here's how we do this. We're another community that already got 15 years into all of this and doesn't know what the food safety regulations are because we already have a boning room. We've done all of these things and now we're trying to make it way simpler for heaps of other people to do it. I want to see micro-abattoirs like ours every 20 to 50 kilometres like they used to be. Yeah, for local communities.
Bring things back to the way they were because after all, it worked.
It totally worked.
Now tell me about the business of this. I'm straight away, I can already see in the comments, people are going to go, oh yeah, this will just drive the price of food up. people will starve. This is not an appropriate way to source protein. This is just going to make food more expensive. This is just for rich people. I had a look at your price list. It's cheaper than my butcher.
Yeah, we're not particularly expensive because we're not doing this to get rich, and we're not doing this to be part of some niche elite society. We're doing this because we're as committed to food security as anybody is, as anybody who works in that space is. Oh, I think you saw only our sausages are more expensive than an industrial sausage.
Yes.
Because they don't have any shit in them. Am I allowed to swear?
I'll bleep it out. That's it.
So because it's all really beautiful ingredients, including just stuff from here on the farm, the herbs and spices and stuff are from here, our garlic, etc. So they cost what it costs us to make them.
Yeah.
And that's how I set all our prices. Everything is based on the cost of production so that we can draw a living wage. That is the living wage. Yes, so it's built into that pricing.
And we'll come back to 7 people with a living wage off 70 acres.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, your produce is no more than what I'd expect to see in the supermarket. It's astounding to me. So this is something that communities can do. Off camera, you made another very important point, because I was asking, is this something that someone like me could actually do? I feel really overwhelmed with everything that you've done. And you made a really important point, and it should never be an individual. It should always be a co-op.
Absolutely. Yeah, this needs to be communities. And even though Stuart and I have been the leader of our local meat collective here at Jonai, we're not alone. There are others who've been turning up to help with a bit of the building on the abattoir. They've helped with the fundraising. They help with communicating with the public to let more people know what's going on and what we need as farmers to be supported. So we're definitely not alone, and I don't think anyone should.
So where to from here? Where do you see abattoirs on farms going in the next decade?
There's going to be hundreds of them. So, when we built our boning room, we were like the only ones with an on-farm boning room. Everyone said, wow, a butcher shop on the farm? That's crazy. And now there are at least scores of them around the country. They're not uncommon anymore. Abattoirs are going to go the same direction as long as we keep showing a prototype that is small and fit for purpose and affordable. If you did what we're doing and it was a $2 million facility, it'd be really hard to replicate. Our $200,000 facility is hard to replicate at that price point because Stuart does all the building.
Others, so if you double it,
yeah, 300 to 400 grand if you have to do what we did. I'm also hoping that very soon, if we win some of the reforms that we're advocating for in every state, then you won't need the strength and height of that tower on the facility. Mm-hmm. If you could kill animals in the paddock and use your tractor, you don't need that part of the facility. That's the most expensive and complicated part of the build. If you were doing these all in 40-foot containers, like others have done in Victoria and New South Wales and WA and South Australia, actually there's some everywhere, like at least one per state. If you do the 40-foot container, you can deliver these things for between $50,000 and $100,000.
Now, we're talking about food sovereignty here, aren't we, at the end of the day? This is not some hippie collective. This is not some pie-in-the-sky idealism. This is, can we ensure that we have food for our families and our communities into the future that's not owned by foreign entities that can switch the lights off at any stage?
Totally. It's interesting, you asked that, because in our 20s, we sort of had this ideal that we wanted to be sort of dropouts and self-sufficient and all of that. And then as we got older, we realized that, well, we have always been interested in self-sufficiency. We've never wanted to be dropouts because we don't want to only look after ourselves. We actually want to look after more than just ourselves. So becoming small-scale farmers and feeding a small community of people in a larger community of farmers feeding other small communities, like that kind of replicating event, like that's what I want. I want to see more farms, not bigger farms. I want to see more abattoirs, not bigger abattoirs. That's the entire drive for us of why we do all the things we're doing.
So Tammy, you're nearly there. It's nearly a dream accomplished. You're a couple of months away and you're still doing a little bit of final fundraising. You've got a little bit of room to go.
Yep.
Almost there with your targets, almost there with your build. Can people support you?
Yeah, for sure they can. So the main fundraiser that's still running is my cookbook.
Yep.
Oh, look, there's one now.
Oh, my goodness. How did this get here?
Amazing.
So this is quite an amazing cookbook too, because it goes through not only what the meat cuts are and how to cook them and some great recipes for how to do it, but there's a lot of other information in here as well, isn't there?
There is. It's most important part of the cookbook for me, obviously delicious food is the end result, but to get there, you've got to understand the system. And so I used my 30 years of worrying at the food system to write the politics of the system into each. So there's politics of dairy, politics of eggs, politics of fat, politics of sugar. And that takes you through systemically what's wrong, and then into a hierarchy of decisions, like what can you at home do about it?
So
Whether it's writing
information for you at home,
100%.
how to curate your diet to be healthier.
And also, how to write a letter to your MP about supporting the micro abattoir campaign that the Food Sovereignty Alliance is running. You know, like it's not just vote with your dollar. It's actually get more political in small ways. You don't have to be marching in the streets.
And it's a very positive book.
Oh,
it's
totally.
not a negative book.
Yeah.
And if people purchase this book through the link in the description, so if you go down on the video down there in the description, there'll be a link for buying this book. The proceeds of this actually go straight towards the micro abattoir.
100%.
And it'll help you, help your community have great access to fresh food that keeps people employed in the local area.
Yeah. Actually, I have to show you. Look at this. If you open this book,
open
it shows you, who wouldn't want to eat like the Jonai when you see my grandbaby?
So guys, if you are impressed with this story, and like me, you're thoroughly impressed with what Tammy and her family have been able to achieve with the help of the local growing community behind them, get a hold of this book, because not only will you get information out of it, but you'll help them get over the line. Now, speaking of getting over the line, I'm going to have to put this down because I might drop it. You were telling me the state government have actually been helpful.
They are. They actually, and now most of the state governments are trying to be helpful, but most are behind Victoria because we've been working more closely with Victoria for longer. And they've created a working group on access to abattoirs. They've produced an e-guide to micro abattoirs to take you through the regulatory authorities you need to deal with and the steps you need to take. They're actively supporting us. One of the MPs who's...
That's great to hear.
It's so good. I really enjoy working with them now because they understand the scale of the problem, they understand the impact on local communities, and they want Victorians to have access to Victorian meat. So they know they've got to do something to support our efforts.
And at the end of the day, we need farmers to feel supported by their government, to feel supported by their communities, and have a way of selling their produce at a fair price in good quality amounts that will feed local mouths.
That's exactly what we need. That's why we're doing this.
So guys, send this video to someone you know who's concerned with food sovereignty, and get onto the book in the description to help support some amazing efforts that are being made in this area. And if you like this kind of video, as always, don't forget, hit the subscribe button and give it a thumbs up, because it makes a massive difference to the channel. And I'll see you with something else next week.
So because all my sausages are made with stuff from the garden, and so because it's, we had a drought into winter, so there's nothing really growing. So we raided the larder for some of our stewed plums and mixed that with some tamari, and I steeped the stewed plum with garlic and star anise, and that's what you just had. And salt from Mount Zero, pepper from L&L Pepper up in southern Queensland. Well,